Welcome to the Forest Analytics Landing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Russell. In this podcast, we'll talk about how data and analytics are transforming the forest products industry. We'll share how a research-based approach to analytics can empower your forestry organization to make better decisions with your data. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast today. Today, I want to talk about what's new in R. Now, I know not everyone is an R user, but odds are if you're in forestry and you do analysis with data, you at least probably know what R is. And so R is one of the most popular packages, softwares for doing statistical analysis, data manipulation, pretty much anything you need to get done with data, R can help. And so it is now one of the most popular software packages. It's taught in the majority of classrooms at the undergraduate and graduate level for people doing statistics, for people doing data science. And so it's just a really incredible tool that's being used in all different industries, in all different venues for lots of different problems that need to be solved. And so I thought I'd just spend some time today talking about really what's new in R. Really, this is kind of the last 6 months to a year or so. Just kind of mentioning what's been new and some new things that come out that I think everyone that looks at data in R might find useful. And so I've got 4 things I've written down. And so the first thing is that RStudio, one of the most popular softwares or interfaces for working with R, is actually changing its name. And so the company will be changing their name from RStudio to Posit, as in you posit a hypothesis. And so Posit, spelled P-O-S-I-T. And so they recently announced this at their RStudio conference in early August, and was really interested to hear them do that. And I think they describe a lot in one of their blog posts about why they're changing their name, but RStudio in itself is kind of limiting to what they do. You know, they're a company now that doesn't work just with R, but they're increasingly using things like Python and other software packages and integrating that into their environment. So for them to kind of be labeled RStudio, I think they think that it quite limits them in terms of their reach and really what they do. And so it's really exciting to kind of see that company, seeing it grow really the last 10 years, and then obviously changing its name and kind of the interest in doing and kind of broadening their scope of work in terms of different places and different software that they interact with, which I think is definitely where a lot of software and data analysis is going, especially in the open source world. So it will be interesting to see kind of where RStudio is, a few months from now. They mentioned their name change is going to happen in October of 2022. And so what that will look like in terms of, if you open up RStudio, like to work on your data analysis, if it'll be branded differently, I suspect it probably will. But we'll all kind of be paying attention to what changes might be on the horizon for that, and how it looks different and feels different for those of us that use R on a regular basis. The second thing I wanted to mention was a new tool that is being developed through RStudio, and it's called Quarto. And so any of you that are familiar with Markdown, or specifically R Markdown, are going to be interested in what Quarto does. And so Quarto is a new open source scientific and technical publishing system that works with different languages, whether that's R or JavaScript or Python. And so it's really kind of, in many ways, I kind of see it as not necessarily a replacement for R Markdown, but something that can be a little bit more powerful than just R Markdown. And so I really love the R Markdown ecosystem. I write a lot of documents. You can write blogs. My blog is written through R Markdown and kind of published through Blogdown, which is the website interface to R Markdown. There's lots of different great things I think that Quarto is going to be able to do. And so I think they say that, the Markdown language in R is really fundamentally tied to R. But Quarto, again, kind of in the spirit of RStudio, kind of being more broad, is going to bring more power to people working across platforms. And so I know that within a Quarto document, You can kind of write R code, Python code, and kind of link that with Jupyter notebooks. And so I think there's going to be some really cool things. For those of you especially that work across different programming languages, I think you might find Quarto to be a pretty useful resource moving forward. The only thing I wish is that it were an easier word to say than Quarto, which will take some getting used to. But I'm really looking forward to what that has to offer and how it might be used for publishing documents, books, blogs, websites, different things like that. So I think a lot of cool stuff going to be coming out with more information on Quarto in the future. The third thing I mentioned, especially will be of interest to those of you that develop models and maybe do some statistical models in your work. And that's just really tidymodels. And so tidymodels is a package within the tidyverse, which is really, as many of you know, a way of looking at and describing and wrangling and working with data sets in the R ecosystem. Tidymodels is a way to kind of use the tidyverse language in a modeling framework. And so really cool to be seeing so much stuff come out on the tidymodels package here in recent months. And so one of the things that's on my to-read list is a new book called Tidy Modeling with R. And that's by Max Kuhn and Julia Silge. And that was just released here in July of 2022. And that really focuses on how to use tidymodels and that package and that system for doing all sorts of, whether it's basic modeling, you can think of like simple linear regression, to some of the more advanced things like machine learning and even dipping into some of the AI models and things like that. And so I've got that book on my to-read list, but I think just that there's a ton of information, and I keep seeing more and more stuff about people using tidymodels as a package to get and to perform all of their data modeling needs. And so I think you're only going to see more of that, particularly as people are more interested in working with machine learning models and really comparing that, validating that against some of the other different kind of models that we've done and we've traditionally relied on in the past. So I think there's going to be a tremendous amount of stuff coming out on tidymodels here and into the future. And then the last thing I'll mention, and I know that it's kind of getting that time of year where classes are back in session, but that's learnr. And so learnr is a package that turns R Markdown documents, and I think probably in the future Quarto documents, into an interactive tutorial. And so I've been trying and kind of dipping my toes into developing some learnr, really assignments kind of things, ways to learn about how to do things. And so I've really found it valuable to not just kind of have a static document that you might have kind of someone be working through, especially for, say, a college professor kind of giving an assignment to a student. They can kind of work through a document. What learnr does is basically turn that Markdown document into an interactive tutorial. And so instead of just kind of seeing what you read on the page and then writing out your response or writing out the code, you can actually interact with the data, interact with some of the different functions you might use with learnr. And so learnr is kind of a separate package that allows you to do all of that. I think also it's got great ways you can kind of embed your text and figures and illustrations in there. You can kind of embed what they call code chunks in R. And so that's where you might have an assignment of, okay, here's a function and apply that function to this data set or something like that. And so your users can actually kind of go in and edit that function and then change and see how changing the code results in a different answer. And so you can't really do that in kind of a R Markdown format because, it's basically like, well, you can copy and paste the code 3 or 4 times if you want to see how it changes, but you can't interact with it. And so that's really the value of learnr and kind of what they do. Other things, it can support videos, I've heard, through like if you have a YouTube video, you can kind of add that. You can add quiz questions, which is really valuable too, particularly those of you that rely on and are using R in kind of an educational format. I think there's a lot of value there in terms of trying to understand and trying to convey learning R and the numbers behind whatever you're doing, whether it be in forestry or natural resources or whatever discipline. Trying to learn and to teach R through using something like learnr, I think is going to be really valuable into the future, as particularly students now are really interested in not just seeing the data, but also trying to interact with it. So there you have it. Those are 4 things, I think, that have come out in R, at least in the last year or so, that I think are going to be important to anyone that uses R on a somewhat regular basis. If you use any of these things, whether it be, obviously RStudio is widely used, but if you're looking at things like Quarto, tidymodels, or learnr, I'd love to hear about it. And so do drop me a line, and I'd be happy to kind of share what I've learned about those things with you all. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to the Forest Analytics Landing Podcast. For more information on how data and analytics can empower your organization, visit arbor-analytics.com.